What's going on, everybody? Fedor here from 3D Print SOS. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another season of the direct drive battle. Today we're going to start a little bit differently. We're going with a Tycoon Max from Kywoo3D, but differently because we have some more packages here and we're actually going to be modding this machine a little bit to start with, and I'll explain why in a second. Kywoo3D reached out to me and they said, hey, you're enjoying our machine and we enjoyed your video, how about we send you a new one? So I said okay, but then I started looking at their other machines that they have, and basically they have the Slim, which kind of looks like every other machine honestly, except it's from Kywoo. Then they have the Kywoo Tycoon IDEX, which is essentially this except with two print heads, which is also intriguing but not necessarily something I want to get into at the moment. And then there was this, the Tycoon Max, which is essentially the Tycoon just larger, which I like because the Tycoon has quickly become one of my favorite machines. I use it all the time. It has been a pretty much set it and forget it machine, especially for PETG for me, which I personally really like. So why not something like this? Well, because essentially it's the same thing, it's just a little bit larger. What's so interesting about that? And as we started getting further into the conversation, I started looking at their website and I noticed they have these kits that you can purchase for these printers. One of which is the fast printing kit, and one is the high temperature printing kit. Oh, okay, so now this printer could not only be larger, it could be even faster, and it could print higher temperatures with all metal. Okay, now it's starting to sound a little bit more interesting. So I went ahead and got those kits. The upgrades are here, and let me show them to you because I already opened them when they came in. So here is the 300C high temperature kit, and the thing that's included here is a brand new thermistor, but also a multi-metal heat break, a new block, and a steel nozzle. This particular one is a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, and I'm not sure how the firmware is going to work. I have to look into that exactly. They do have really good videos for all of this stuff on their YouTube, actually, because there's no manuals that come with this. And actually, that's one of the things that's printing behind me. I was watching on one of those videos for the Print Faster kit, and noticed there's some printables that I needed that are not included here. So I'm printing them in PETG on the Kywoo Tycoon while we unbox this machine. And it's going to take a little while, so I'm probably going to get to it. I'm probably going to get the install done the next day, not today. But that's beside the point. Let's keep going. Along with the Hotend, here we have the dual gear extruder, and this is a really similar design to what's on there now, except it comes with a brand new lever here, and the fact that it has bearings is really nice. Most of these, the same style that you can find online, they're really inexpensive, have bushings and they tend to wear out, and the pivot points wear out, and it's a nightmare. And this to me looks like it's not going to do that. It looks like they addressed those issues. So very nice little direct drive a dual gear extruder and an all metal Hotend for 300C printing. Huge fan of that. Alright, then we have a brand new thicker belt with new pulleys and metal brackets. Why do we need those metal brackets? Well, the fast printing kit comes with these absolute behemoths. You get two of these. You get them for the X and the Y. And this is what's originally on machines of this nature. You're pretty much getting 2 times the power, 2 times the torque, and all you have to do after just physically installing these is go use the little potentiometers on your stepper drivers and turn up the voltage to 1.4 from 1 to get these up and running. So yeah, much larger magnets, much more power, should be much easier to move a heavier bed such as a 300 by 300 millimeter bed. The other thing that's included in the faster printing kit is actually 2 of these. These are 2 more linear rails. As you guys know, the Tycoon machines already have linear systems for the X, but the Y is on linear rods. And one of my custom machines that I actually made was essentially a Prusa design where everything ran on rods. But what I ran into when making it larger, I made it a 320 by 320 machine, was there were these vibrations that I just couldn't get out of the linear rods, and that's probably one of the reasons why Prusa never made a larger machine of the same style, because that construction works much better when it's smaller. So this should get rid of that potential problem when trying to push speed on a machine with linear rods. So they're going to be replaced with rails, which is awesome. So in this kit we have dual drive, we have all metal hot end. We have much larger steppers. We have a new belt for that, new brackets for that. And for this, like I said, we have to have some printables done, and that's what's going on there. But then there's also another upgrade that we have here, straight from Kywoo, and it is a pizza. I'm just kidding. It is a PEI spring steel sheet. Look at that. So one thing to note, it says high temperature here, which is really nice to see. It's branded, so it's not just some generic branded PEI sheet. I don't think it's double-sided when I briefly looked before. However, I do want to say that this particular sheet is very uniform on most of these that I have purchased that are inexpensive or even middle of the road, and even some expensive ones honestly have been a little bit blotchy and a little bit less uniform than this. This coating seems like it's slightly higher quality than what I have seen in the past in my pursuit of other PEI sheets. So there you go. So this video is slightly different because we are going to unbox the machine. I'm going to show you everything that's in here, but then instead of just assembling it with its 4 bolts, we're actually going to take it apart further to install some of these parts. So keep that in mind. The assembly is going to be longer because that just, you know, we're going to be installing some fun stuff. But originally, just like the regular Tycoon, you essentially put 2 pieces together, put 4 bolts through it, plug them in, and you're done. So the assembly is usually really, really fast. All right, let me get another angle over here, and let's start unboxing this behemoth of a machine and get it out of this box so we can take a closer look at what's in there. All right, let's get it started. All right, so keep in mind this thing is absolutely massive. So as I take things out, we're probably gonna have to put the box on the floor, take things out, that whole thing. But let's get a blade out and let's get to unboxing. I don't think I cut that back there at all. What an absolute giant box. All right, so right off the top here we have the bed, well protected, large glass bed. We have a little note from Kywoo, a little thank you note. We have the Kywoo manual. If I recall, this thing is actually really well done. Lots of pictures, instructions. Yep, tells you exactly what to do. Because I gotta admit, at first, the firmware is like, it doesn't have deep-rooted menus like most machines do. It's kind of like a what you see is what you get when you click on the fan like icon and it opens the fan menu. If you click on the SD, it opens the SD. You don't like go into menus and go through a menu like you typically do in Marlin. So yeah, this is all good stuff. Nice, and it gives you a full readout of the board that's in here, which is also really nice. Yeah, good manual. Better than most, I would say. All right, right off the bat, this thing is huge. I think I should just put it down. Okay, there's more reachables in here. All right, we have a little mini spool of white PLA, looks like, and a box labeled accessories. Let's see what's in here. We have our tools. Let's see, we have nozzle, little screwdriver, Allen keys, SD card reader. One of my favorite things to see with 3D printers. We got snips, side cutters. What is this? Look at that. This is a spare probe for the BL Touch that's on there. Huh. First machine I've seen to give you a spare. We, of course, have a cable, little needle, some zip ties, the typical stuff. The other thing that's in here is the filament holder, the spool holder. All right, let me bring this box down so I can take this stuff out. All right, so here is the bottom of the machine. Nice and simple, already pre-assembled. All we would have to do originally is just plug in this XT60 connector and use 4 bolts right here to attach this to the other side. And these feet are not only very robust, but very easily adjustable. Definitely always liked this system. Nice and smooth, as expected. We have a power cable. All right, and then we have the main suitcase. It's quite a bit wider than the original Tycoon. Yep, everything looks good. Power supply, motherboard on top there. Essentially, in order for us to install the things that we need to install, we need to get rid of this cover so we'll be able to see what's under there. I don't remember if I mentioned, but they have a really good videos on their YouTube on how to install all of this stuff. It's actually much better than I expected, honestly. So yeah, everything is nice and smooth. Gotta love the linear rails. So while I'm doing this, let me talk about the things that need to happen here. So in order to replace these linear rods, what we need to do is take off this bed to get to this carriage. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take the carriage completely off. We're going to take off the rods and we're going to replace them with the rails. But in order to attach them, we need the printable files that are printing on the Tycoon, and that needs a couple more hours. So I'm going to have to take care of this portion tomorrow. Luckily for you guys, it's within seconds. But then what we're going to do is we're going to take off this bracket here that holds this Y motor, and we're going to attach our larger one. It seems like it's very straightforward. In most cases on other machines, you would have to do some of these things to install the machine and, you know, put it together in the first place. So not that crazy. If this is something that you've never done before, I don't think you should necessarily be scared to do something like this, if that makes any sense. I know it's quite technical to replace something like this, but it's very straightforward, and like I said, their videos are extremely helpful because this type of modification is not in the manual. And I'll just speed through the install process, and if there's specific things that I'm running into or something that I think is worthwhile, I'm going to go ahead and slow it down for you. Let me go ahead and get my hands dirty, and let's get this thing modded. Alright, so I just finished the lower portion of the printer. Actually a pretty fun build installing these. And the top here, the 3D printed PETG parts came out perfect from the Tycoon. They were really easy to install. Essentially they're just clips that hold down the rails, and then they're kind of like spacers over here that space out the bed to get them to the right height. So as you can see right here, there's these little wings that kind of are on these spacers, and this one right here, the one closest to the front right where the sensor is, that one was actually interfering a bit, so it's plastic, so I just clipped off a tiny amount. I did see that there's files without those wings, and I'm not sure why I specifically chose these. If I was to do it again, I would just print these spacers without the little winglets. They're just kind of like flat spacers. Here, if I move the bed to the very front, you should be able to kind of see them a little bit better in there. There you go. See these little wings? They're really kind of unnecessary. They're not bad to have on there whatsoever, but you just don't really need them on here. So yeah, you kind of align everything with the new belt here, make sure it's going nice and smooth. I haven't lubricated this yet, and I do have some grease that I'll be putting on there, but so far everything is nice and smooth. This build plate, the magnet, is cut absolutely flawlessly. Everything is super sturdy. There's absolutely zero movement, and because there are no springs in the system, so we know at least it's going to be as flat as this aluminum is, and all of that will be taken care of with a mesh that the printer can do by itself. But yeah, we'll see how strong this magnet is. But yeah, this lower half of the machine is so nice. This has got to be one of the most robust setups that I personally have had, and I'm really excited to see what it's all about. So I'm done with this. Now we move on to adding the monster stepper onto our X-axis. So should be easy. It's all right there. All I basically have to do is take this cover off, and that will also give us access to the motherboard, which we're going to take a multimeter and turn up the power to 1.5. Like I said, I didn't go into detail on all this because they have an actually really great video tutorial for each one of these specific modifications. So I'm going to leave it to Kywoo and their team for that. They did a great job, so no need for me to go into detail for that. All right, let's keep going. So far, I'm having a lot of fun. Let's get this stepper installed. Alright, so a lot of this came together really easily, and actually the build so far has been really fun to do, and I'm excited to just continue going. But I ran into some little issues here and there. I'm going to pause here and sleep on it and decide on what to do. Basically what's happening is I went to install the dual gear extruder, and it looks like there's a downside to it that I didn't quite know. Well, one is you lose the knob at the front of the extruder, and this knob lets you make filament changes really easily. And yes, on a direct drive you can kind of like feed it much easier with your hand. Still, twisting this knob to be able to help you pull filament out or in is always really easy. And with the Tycoon, I've never actually had problems with the single gear extruder. But the other thing that I'm finding here is the thermistor needs to be reran. It needs to be reran all the way. And I already put everything, already put the cover back on. So unfortunately, I have to take all of that back off to get access to the motherboard and undo this whole wiring sheath. And the problem I ran into is these two M2 screws that hold on the filament runout sensor that also happen to hold the all of the wire harness are both stripped out. I don't think they came that way, but I definitely could not get them undone. They seem pretty rounded off. I don't know if they were just over tightened and I just can't get it. Yeah, I mean, I can spin my bit in there. Either way, I have to get past that, so I'll either have to cut them off or find some other way to undo this. I don't really want to cut this because these little plastic loops actually hold this really nice and tightly. Is that a word? Tidy, so I'm not going to undo that. But yeah, the part that I want to kind of consider in my head is, do I want to run the dual gear extruder and change E-steps, or just throw the original back on? The cooling, if you could look into this machine, some people don't really like the cooling, but I personally haven't really had any issues specifically with it. Mind you, I haven't really been printing too much PLA with it, the filament that would need cooling. Most of the stuff that I've been printing on the Tycoon actually needs to be reduced in cooling. Like, I think my PETG profile uses 50% or even 30% cooling, so that's not something that I have needed on that machine. So I just have to think about what I want to do here, but obviously I'll go over with what I ended up doing. Been a fun project so far. Really excited to see how fast this thing can print. All right, guys, a little bit of an update. I did take a couple of days of a break from this machine, but I'm back at it now. I actually spent that time to get myself some ferrules and a crimping tool. I ran out of my old ones that I had, and I didn't like what I had. This one seems a lot better, but I figured since I'm going to be taking everything apart again, I did notice that the power leads going to the motherboard in this machine don't have ferrules. They're not crimped. They're just soldered. So I'm just going to spend the time, the couple seconds that it's going to take to add some ferrules so that connection is nice and reliable. I did get a couple more things. I got this thermal grease from Zodiac nozzles, and I'm going to use just thermal grease. You can get any thermal grease really, or boron paste, I believe it's called also. But I'm going to put thermal grease on the heat break. I'm going to put on the nozzle and all the other components that revolve around the hot end, like the hardware, thermistor. All of that's going to be nice and coated on the inside. I did end up going back to the non-dual gear extruder. I just like the knob too much. I know that's weird, but like I said, I've never had any problems with the extruder, specifically with TPU, with anything really, on the other Tycoon, so I'm just going to keep this. One other thing here is I did manage to get the sensor off. This hardware is actually 2.5 millimeter hardware. Not that that's necessarily relevant, but I just found that surprising. But I did end up finding a tip that managed to get this off. So it is on here. It says that it's a T6H. My other one that I've been using and my other Allen keys are T6s. I'm not sure why. Maybe this one's just sharper or newer, but it was able to grab a hold, and I did get these off. So I'm just going to make sure that they're somewhat loose because I don't have 2.5 millimeter hardware. But so it wasn't stripped. That's a correction there. What else? Yeah, I found a fun little fan, 30 millimeter Winson RGB fan that I'm going to put on the front. I'm not going to be using the stock shroud that was on here. So what I'm going to do is I peeled some of this back. I'm going to put a connector on here so that the fans are easily swappable. That's what I'm going to do real quick. Just to get this portion of the machine done. And yes, I know this one's a little bit more modded than the rest have been so far in the direct drive battle, but I actually realized that in this season I do have a couple that are going to be mods. And I'm personally okay with that. I think they're a little bit more fun for me to do and fun to see what those machines can do. So, like I said, in my personal opinion, I think it's okay that Tycoon is extremely similar to this. Literally, the only difference is just the size of the bed. So it's going to be a nice comparison between that machine and this upgraded one. Just, you know, I'll kind of like ignore the larger size when I'm thinking about its performance and testing it. But yeah, all of these little modifications are going to come together, and I'm having a lot of fun modding this thing. I just love the way that this thing's put together. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. All right, let me get this done. Next time you see it, it'll all be ready, and we'll throw some filament through it. All right, let's get going. Hey guys, remember when I said you're not going to see me until this is done? Well, I lied. Fight me. I wanted to show you this. This isn't for this particular machine necessarily, but most 3D printers that you're going to get are going to come like this. These power wires are tinned with solder, and then they are just pushed into these connectors on the motherboard, and they're just screwed tightly. Now what happens is, over time, this might not ever happen in your experience, but it has to some people, where this could get potentially hot because of a loose connection. That heat starts melting this part, makes even more loose connection, and this could cause a short or a fire or all kinds of things. It's rare, but it happens for sure. And I have a ton of machines that don't have this, so it's not like I'm going through every single machine and changing them. But while you're in here, it's very easy to do. Essentially, what you want to do to make this right is to slip on one of these little ends. And the way you would do that is you want to actually cut this off so that to get the solder off. So I would snip this, and then basically you slide it on here. Let me show you here. Here you go, both of these are cut up, and there's two wires here because they need to go together. And I'm going to slip this over it, and kind of spinning while I do it. It goes far back as it goes, right there. Then you get the tool. As you can see, it's kind of like a square, and when you tighten, it pinches together from all sides. So you slip that on the piece of metal, and then you just crimp until it lets go. And what this does is it combines them all together, and then this piece you can easily just slide right into the little terminal, and then use the little flathead to clamp it tight, just like that. And now you have a secure connection that won't come loose over time or get hot or anything like that. It's going to be as secure of a connection as metal on metal is going to get here. So that's why people online and just everywhere you'll see people talk about these crimped ends, and that's basically it. So this little kit was very inexpensive. I'll have a link down in the description below, and this particular tool is way better than the one I had previously. So yeah, I'm just going to go through and put these little ends on all of these, just so that all the connections that deliver power are nice and secure. It literally takes seconds to do once you have this tool. So yeah, all right, let's keep going. See ya. Well, here's a fun plot twist. As you can see, I had to take all the ferrules off, and that's because what happens is this cover that kind of covers this entire area slides on the edges of these rails, and there's very little gap between the actual board, these connectors, and the edge. And when having the connectors come out a little bit, I cannot slide the cover over. I don't know if they make 90-degree ferrules, but that would be pretty much the only way to get them to work. So as you can see, I ended up undoing everything I did and putting them all back in how they were. It's not really going to be a problem. This case does keep these really secure. Make sure these are all the way tightened as much as you can. Make sure you got connections everywhere here if you're taking this cover on and off at all. But unfortunately, in this configuration, with this board tilted in this direction, everything the way that it is right here, at least stock, you're not going to be able to have ferrules here unless you get some kind of 90-degree ferrule. Either way, I'll still have links. I think you should put them on everything that you work on. I don't necessarily think you need to do it right away, but if you're ever opening a machine and you're there at those connectors and they're not there and you're able to put them on, it's just a no-brainer. It's so fast and so easy to do. I highly suggest it. Alright, as far as this goes, I already ran all the wiring. I ran the thermistor. I ran everything, the new fan wire. Everything's done. I'm just going to assemble it, and let's see what this thing looks like when it's all done, okay? Alright. Let's get it going. Alright, so the Kywoo Tycoon Max. There's a lot to talk about with this one, so please bear with me. As always, I made a pros and cons list like I normally do, and we're going to go ahead and start with the cons. I do want to mention that when this machine was completely stock, it has almost exactly the same experience and performance as the regular size Tycoon. It's quite literally, do you need the 300 by 300 space or you don't? That's the choice. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. It runs the same firmware, it behaves the same, it sounds the same, you know, all of those things. And actually a correction for two things that I mentioned earlier. This is a 230 millimeter height. I did not get much taller, if at all. So it does have the 300 by 300 bed, but it did not get taller for this particular machine. So that's something I messed up a little earlier. I thought it was taller. And also the price. I noticed the price went down to $430, which is a really good price for such a machine. Okay, so that's what I wanted to get out of the way. The couple other things that I wanted to mention are the filament that I used here was by California Filament. This was PETG, and as you know, as you might have noticed, it prints PETG great. I'm using the same profiles as the regular Tycoon, and it works perfectly with Cura with all of those profiles. I'll get into some details a little bit later, but if you guys need some PETG, California Filament has a giant selection of PETG, more than most companies have with their PLA. So if you want a giant selection of PLA materials, 3D Max is a good one to look at. If you guys need PETG in a variety of colors, California Filament, I've had a lot of luck with them, and they have a massive discount code, 25% off, I believe, in the links down below, so check that out. I did notice that my yellow, transparent yellow, was popping at first and fizzing a bit, which means it just had some moisture, so I popped it into the Sunlu FilaDryer. It was my first time actually using this thing and comparing it to my old dryer. This thing did great. I did it overnight, so about 8 or so hours, and there is absolutely no more moisture in the filament at all. No popping, no hissing, prints perfectly. I did really like the readout, and it not having a fan didn't play a role whatsoever. I did put desiccant from the filament into the center of the spool just to have some desiccant in there. I don't see a reason why not, and it worked perfectly fine. So just to note, I also noticed that the hole is the perfect size for PTFE tubing, so if you have some extra or you want to buy some, it will come out so you can print right from here and run it directly from your printer. So far, these two products I really enjoyed. Let me get them out of the way. Alright, so I wanted to mention how this thing behaves when it would have been out of the box without the modifications that we did, because I think some of the cons we ran into and just the general thing about the machine so far in its particular way that it is right now, some of those things happen because of these modifications. So let's talk about it. I usually do the cons in these things first, so let's do it that way. Let's get those out of the way. So the first thing you guys saw, there's no ferrules, there's no crimped connectors on the motherboard, and there's no space for them, and that's why they're not there. Unless there's some 90-degree connectors that you might be familiar with, you're not going to be able to do it in this machine unless you reorient the motherboard. Honestly, I have a feeling that most of my, actually I know this for sure, most of the machines that I have and have had and still use daily, they don't have crimped connectors. So it's not that big a deal, although if you're ever in there, I still suggest you do it. You just can't do it in this particular machine. So if you're looking for some ferrules and a nice tool, I think I found one. I'll have links down in the description. And it's kind of sad that I can't put crimped connectors on there just because I had the opportunity to do it. It's kind of like my rule of thumb. If I'm in there, I put them on. So you can't in this machine, so I'm going to name them a con. Like I said, this isn't really going to be a big deal for most people, but it is for some. I know it's important, and I do think you should put them on there if you have access and you have them. All right, moving right along. No extruder knob on the dual gear extruder upgrade. I know this is not a big deal. This is literally a personal preference, and I stuck with the single sided extruder. I've never had issues with them, especially on the regular Tycoon, so I just stuck with it. I do really like this particular knob. I use it all the time to take filament out, put it back in, do all kinds of tests. It just makes it so easy to have that knob there. Obviously, you can just go into the menus, you know, and get filament out, put filament in, but it's just so much easier for me personally with that knob. Usually I just, you know, turn the heat up on the machine and bam, bam, bam. So easy to do. So minor con, just my personal opinion, I wish I could put the iconic Kywoo3D knob on the dual gear extruder, because that's what would be on here right now. Then it says you have to print your own brackets and spacers for the fast speed upgrade. That's true. Kind of disappointing to see them not include something metal or plastic in the box, and you know, printing them is not that big a deal. I just kind of didn't expect it, and I did go look and read on their website. It does give you the files, and it does say that they're not included. You need to print them. They can be printed in PLA, PETG. If you have another machine, fine. If you don't have another machine, you are going to have to set the machine up as is, print, and then do the modification. Not that big of a deal, but still, I kind of would have thought that, you know, you're paying some money for the upgrades. I kind of thought those kind of things would be included. All right, let's see. So the other thing is firmware, and we're going to get into some gray areas here, because technically speaking, out of the box, the thing would work perfectly fine, just like this one. No issues revolving there, but I had to change some firmware because we did the hot printing upgrade, which is supposed to go to 300C. Now, there's three firmwares that Kywoo has. They have an old one, a more recent one, and a current one. That's what we're going to call them. The current one is really good. It has everything that you might want. It has PID tuning. It has jerk, acceleration, E-steps. In fact, it has a hot temperature setting that you can just click, and it goes all the way up to 300. There's a bunch of settings in it that are baked into the firmware, and it works really well. One other benefit is the Wi-Fi settings are now on the screen. Everything saves by itself. There's just so many benefits. The problem is that firmware doesn't detect the not the runout sensor. It doesn't detect the end stop on the Y, so it crashes, and there's no way to get it to stop. At first, I thought it was a physical problem, so I changed the sensor out. That wasn't it. So then I tried to check the wiring with a multimeter. Everything was working fine, so I know it was firmware because I threw on the oldest firmware, and it just worked right out of the box. However, the oldest firmware doesn't have a bunch of the settings that you might want. The only benefit for the old one is that it comes with a config file that you can like manually go in and literally in a text document add in your max temps and things like that. Basically go through G-code, and I know not everyone's going to want to do that. However, that's how I confirmed that it works, and it's actually on there right now. It's missing everything. There's a bunch of different weird things in this firmware, but it does work, and it does print, and it does do everything. But I just wish that the more recent one worked. The reason why I mentioned the middle one is because when I tried running the middle one, thinking it was the middle ground and it's going to be kind of like best of both worlds, well, that one runs the bed into the wrong direction, so it has to be reversed. And there are ways around that. For example, you can, instead of recompiling the whole firmware, you can reverse the direction by making steps negative. So for example, the steps are 80. If you make them a negative 80 via just the line in G-code, well, then it'll go in the other direction. But the end stop also did not work. So basically, the oldest firmware proves that physically everything's working. There's just probably a line of G-code that needs to be added in the most recent firmware for it all to work. I obviously messaged Kywoo, and I think they're in the middle of some kind of office move. At least that's what I saw in one of the Facebook groups. Is not a lot of people are able to reach them right now, and I haven't in the past 4 days. They're usually very fast with replies. So if and when they give me the more recent firmware that fixes this issue, I will put a link to it down in the pinned comments. So pay attention to that, because it is going to fix all of the problems and most of the cons that revolve around it. Yeah, because it's missing, like the old one is missing a bunch of options. Some of the icons don't even work. It's kind of strange. that it's there, but I understand it's really, really old in terms of firmware goes, and the more recent one, like I said, has everything in it. They changed some of the icons, the way some of the menus look. It just, everything is easier and better in that new menu. One of my favorite parts is Wi-Fi. Not only can you connect it to your Wi-Fi really easily right from the screen, but you can also run it in AP mode, which is what I recommend. I recommend you guys set like a Kywoo3D Wi-Fi, put any kind of really simple password onto it, and whenever when you want to print to the machine, you go into Cura and you basically drop down and connect to the printer's Wi-Fi and print to it that way. I personally think that's the most secure. I wouldn't want this thing sitting on my Wi-Fi just because, I don't know, but I always found it to be nice. And actually, even though you can't do that in the menus here, it does have the same features in that little old school config file. You can set it to AP mode, give it the SSID and the password, and that's what I've done, and that's how it's working right now. Also, when I was doing the old Kywoo review or first impressions video, the Cura plugin wasn't working. It is now. You can easily print to it. It's built into Cura. If you go into the marketplace, you can download the MKS Wi-Fi module. So there you go. The firmware isn't quite up to par. It has some kind of issues. So if you were to get this thing out of the box the way it was, don't touch it. You know, as far as firmware goes, enjoy how the printer is. It will print just like mine has, and I've loved it. But if you're doing the fast speed and the hot printing, you might need to wait for them, and I have a feeling within a couple days that will be fixed. So, and that's it. That's actually the list of my cons. Very little things to complain about on this machine. Everything else is on the pros list, so let's try to get through that real quick. Alright, the first thing on my pros list is robust like no other machine. I shouldn't probably say no other machine, but out of all the machines that I have, no other machine in my little basement here, this thing is just an absolute tank. It's heavy, it's large, it doesn't take up too much space because the bed doesn't go much further than where the rails are, but still, it just, you know, it's all metal. It's just heavy. It's nice. I like that. I like that it doesn't feel flimsy. It doesn't feel cheap. When you buy this thing and you set it up on your table, it feels absolutely legit. And I know that's not necessarily a real thing, but chassis stiffness, in my personal opinion, in printers is really nice. So that's the first pro. Easy to put together. If you guys don't do the rails or anything with the extruder, it is literally 4 bolts to put together, as you guys saw in the Tycoon video. Couldn't be easier to set up. Literally couldn't. I mentioned California Filament, mentioned the Sunlu. Those are both in the pros. They were great. The PEI Sheet is a must to buy. I stand by that. I think if you're going to get this machine, or literally if any machine that you're going to get, one of the first things you should do is get a PEI Sheet. It makes your life so much easier over glass. It works with a bunch of different materials. It's easy to take off and remove. It's just better. It is a really good surface. It gives you a little texture. Just PEI Sheets, definitely get them. And I definitely recommend this one, especially for hot temperature. The ends on each 2020 extrusion are chamfered and not sharp. This is actually not something I've ever noticed on any other machine. I know this isn't necessarily a big deal, but when you're working on the inside of the machine, there's extrusions coming out everywhere, and none of them are sharp. All of them, somebody went over with some kind of tool that chamfered all the edges, and they're nice and smooth and aren't sharp. That's just a nice little tiny attention to detail that I really appreciate. And I know, like I said, it's tiny and really not important, especially because it's all behind there. But to me, the fact that somebody went through that trouble to make sure that they do that on this machine, I definitely like that, and I appreciate it. The upgrades are inexpensive in comparison to DIY. That is 100% true. I don't remember off the top of my head what the prices are, but when I looked, I was kind of impressed, actually, that they are so cheap. If you were to buy rails of this size, this length, they would be probably around double the cost that they were for this machine, and same with the regular size. In fact, the regular size, I think they're even cheaper. So definitely a good idea there. The rest of the modifications, like the all-metal Hotend, they're priced correctly. I think they're around $15 or so, which is I would say the right price for for that, and obviously, as you can see in all the prints, they're working perfect. The other pro is a bunch of fun printable cosmetic options on Thingiverse. So that was why I wanted to bring up the prints a little later. So I went ahead on Thingiverse and I found this cover that prints onto the top. It printed out great, very little bit of stringing, cleaned right up, but essentially this jumps on the top, and you might have seen it that I put it on there. My hope with this was to use it with this. This is actually a duct that attaches to the side of it like that, which I think is a really good idea. It moves the fan from pulling air from kind of like the back and underneath to a higher spot, a little bit more away from the heat and on the side, and it puts this in a slightly better position to blow air in a better way onto the tip of the nozzle here. But the problem with this design, and this design is from them, is when you go to attach this, the two screws holding this on prevent the fan on going on evenly. And not only does it look cheap, it doesn't work, and it bends everything out of the way. You can do it without putting these screws on, but then this whole thing is only held by two screws on the side, and it kind of just sits kind of funky and wobbles because of its weight. So this was a really, really good idea, but unfortunately it didn't work. Unless I'm missing something, or maybe the duct is just something is wrong with the spacing of the duct here. But what I would think would happen is this gets attached to the fan, you put this on, and then you attach this to the thing, and then you're done. So I think this needs some kind of redesign. There are actually quite a bit of cooling solutions for this machine, but I'm just went and put the stock fan back on. Like I said, I've been using this thing for a while now, and I haven't had a single complaint about cooling, so it's just going to stay here, especially because if I'm going to be printing hot temperatures on this machine, which is my plan, I'm not going to be using that fan, because most materials, like even some PETG, but ABS, nylons, etc., they don't need any cooling, so I'm not worried about that fan the way it is. And then the last thing on here is the Cura profiles from the Tycoon, or all work on the Max. They're available on their website. They give you a nice baseline for TPU, which works really great on this machine, by the way, PETG, and PLA. So yeah, we tested PETG on this machine, obviously, because it's almost exactly the same as this machine. I know it's going to print the rest, and in Cura you just select the same profile, so everything that I already had for PETG, as you can see, works absolutely perfectly in this machine as well. So that's my pros and cons list. We went ahead and talked about all the materials I used, all the other products I used that helped. Do I think that these upgrades are worth buying? I personally do. I think that if the firmware just addresses the end stop here, I think everything is solved. And not only that, it adds so much more functionality to the printer. I'm definitely going to be putting that firmware on this machine as well, because it is just really good. It fixes a lot of the little tiny quirks that were kind of iffy in the other firmware. So I also wanted to say that I did try to compile my own firmware, because they do give you the source code, since they all, this is all open source. And I did manage to compile it without any errors. I'm definitely no pro at compiling firmware. I can do it, I have done it, but I'm just not super confident in doing it. But what happens with the firmware that I make myself is it goes to install and it gets stuck at 100%, and I can't get it to fully get onto the machine. So that's why I don't have the latest one. I'm just going to wait until Kywoo replies and addresses this in some kind of fix. I even posted on their GitHub with an issue, but no one has replied there either. Like I said, I think they're moving offices right now or something along those lines, and they're in China, slightly different culture than it is here, and they do it their own way. So it's fine. Everything is working the way I like it. I have my hot temperatures. I have my Wi-Fi. I just want all those features on there, and I have a feeling we're going to get it really soon. So unfortunately, not an absolutely perfect experience with the firmware, but so far everything that we have here and I've done, I really enjoy. Right now it's been printing for a little while. Let's see, does it tell me how long on there? 40 minutes. So it's been printing for 40 minutes. this giant stepper is literally cold to the touch, so I'm not even working it even close. If you guys want to see me push this machine further, I need to wait for that firmware so I can increase all those numbers, get it going really fast, throw some PLA on here. I know we're going to go super fast on the PLA. With my PETG profile, I like to go slow because it removes almost all stringing. If I start to speed it up at all, I do get a lot of strings, and it just makes it much more hard to clean up. I'm patient, it goes a little bit slower with PETG. But with these rails, with PLA, if you guys want to see that, maybe we can make a really fast profile, maybe throw a 0.6mm nozzle on here and just go crazy. Let me know in the comments below if you guys would like to see that from this machine, if you're interested, especially at around 420, 450 price range. This is a really nice to have 300 by 300 machine with a lot of features. It's so robust, still upgradable. I even saw that there is a way to install a really simple enclosure because you don't have to put the whole thing. It's just this portion right here that needs to be enclosed on both sides. It's a really easy DIY, and they even include all the files for that. So it just keeps going and going. It kind of makes me want to just upgrade it, even though it doesn't necessarily need it much. Although if we do get into nylons and ABS, maybe the enclosure would be fun. Is that something you guys would like to see? Let me know in the comments below. Alright guys, a couple other things I want to mention is the Discord for this channel. There'll be a link down in the description below. Go ahead and join. Lots of people in there helping troubleshoot machines, answering questions, sharing prints, just talking about whatever you guys want to talk about, 3D printing related or not. It's been a really great community to be in there, and it just, it's really nice to go on and just scroll through everyone's conversations, try to help out whenever I can, and we have a few mods now that also help out, and a few other really helpful people in the community helping in the Discord, which I appreciate. Thank you guys very much. Another thing is there is a Patreon set up for this channel. If you guys like what I do here, please consider becoming a Patreon member. You get to see all of these videos early, you get to message me one-on-one directly, and you literally directly help the channel out. So outside of using links and subscribing to the channel, Patreon would be the best next thing, as well as joining the YouTube channel. There should be a join link down below. I'm still working on how to make myself useful for our YouTube members. Please message me and give me a suggestion. I'm definitely new to the YouTube membership game, and I'm working on it, and we will get there as soon as humanly possible. Alright, I think that is all for me, and as always, I'll see you guys in the comments. Later.